You're listening to the Survivor Sweat Podcast with Mike Buckmiller and Russell Rosenblum. If you're looking for strategy articles and just about everything Survivor, head to survivorsweat.com. Now, let's get to it.
Okay, welcome to Survivor Sweat Pod number 3. This is the Jed entry. We were last year's winners. My name is Mike Buckmiller, and my partner in crime is Russell Rosenblum. Quite the carnage this week, including us. So we don't feel
mostly us. I think mostly us was the carnage.
Definitely don't feel like winners for sure.
And clarity, like I point out every week, we were the Jed entry last year. We had a Jed entry this year, but we do have other entries. So we are still in, despite the fact that Jed entries are gone. But we've probably lost, I think, just about 75% of our picks, something like that. So it's not been a great Survivor year for us. Being, I think the field has lost about 25%, so we're sort of flip-flop. But, we do have some good teams remaining in the entries we still have, and we just sort of plot ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to narrow that down a little bit, there's 5,924 entries left with 3,343 eliminated. So 36% of the pool was eliminated. Yeah. And that includes the 7 no picks that everybody likes to talk about. But we will move on from that.
I feel like whenever we take Denver, it's sort of a no pick anyway.
Right? Denver
has been easier.
Denver has literally been the thorn in our side. And I'm wondering if that isn't some retribution from Denver after last year's Baltimore save. So
could be.
Know. Who knows?
And we had Denver, I think, if I remember right, in week 1 or 2 last year, we had Denver in a couple spots and they lost also.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy. It's only been 2 weeks and I feel like I'm beaten and battered. And I think it's because we've lost 3 key games. All of them.
In weeks 1 and 2, we've literally over the first 2 weeks, those are the 3 games we had 1, 2, 3 most entries on.
Yes.
Overall. Not just bigger percentage, not just biggest percentage each week, literally numbers 1, 2, and 3 entries total that we've lost. So it's certainly frustrating, but I'm probably less frustrated than Russell Wilson is. So there's that.
Absolutely. So there was 280 Thursday night plays. Well, 281, 280 on Philly, 1 on Minnesota. We obviously had some on, well, not obviously, but we had some on Philadelphia. And some in our group thought we should take more, not to be result oriented, but what was the reasoning behind possibly taking more on the Thursday night game?
Well, and the reasoning that we didn't both. I mean, the reasoning behind taking more in terms of the immediate EV, their expected value, right? They were probably our best overall pick. The issue we had internally, and when I say the EV, it's because other teams that we sort of took instead, we were already going to have a lot on Denver, and we did. But you then end up taking teams like, you take a little bit more on the Giants and you take a little bit more on the Bills. They won, but that's a spot where if we know, of course, 40% of the field is going to take them, it's a whole, different analysis, but we even thought probably 30% would take them, at which point we're rooting against them anyway. So then we have a bunch of picks on a team we're sort of rooting against. So it doesn't like that's a spot for us to really pick up ground. We probably should have avoided it entirely. I understand because we took them, they advanced. It is what it is, but I'm trying not to be results oriented there. So some of that would have been a reason to take more Philly. The reason we didn't take more Philly, there were some people in the group that felt that Philly was a little bit banged up in their secondary, and it's a short week. So you've got guys that aren't as rested, and you got guys dinged up, and that Minnesota and Kirk Cousins should be fairly game there. And this is what I always say, the funny thing about sports betting, right? Let's just assume 50% of people had bet Philly and 50% bet Minnesota, just for easy math here, right? You probably have 75 or 80% of the people that actually believe they were quote unquote right. Because you walk away from this game and Philly didn't look great.
No,
Minnesota didn't look great either. They looked less bad. Philly looked less bad than Minnesota. Yeah. But if you don't have the touchdown through the end zone, the touchback through the end zone, the fumble through the end zone, it looks like Minnesota probably wins the game. Yeah. And so, I don't know.
And I, for one, was one of those guys that knew that Minnesota was banged up in the secondary. The Eagles were banged up in the secondary.
Correct. Yep.
Minnesota had some clear mismatches, and they actually took advantage of them in the second half. And to your point, if that ball doesn't go through the end zone and that's a touchdown there, this game may have turned out completely different.
The whole game flow changes. So it's not as if it's just 7 points and they lost by 6, so they win by 1, right? It's not that clear cut.
Yeah.
But the whole game flow does change. And so then instead of Minnesota having to press constantly, you've got Philly having to press and gamble more.
Yep.
The whole game flow changes. But obviously, if Minnesota scores at that point in the game, they're a pretty decent favorite to win the game. Like at that point, you would not have wanted Philly. You're an underdog. You're not one of the bigger prices on the board. You'll be an outright underdog in the game. So, you look at that and it's so tough. It's so tough to not be results oriented in this and say you either won or you lost. And I think that is the tough thing, not just about Survivor, sports betting in general. Most of the time when a team wins, when you make a bet and you win, you believe you were right. You don't think too much about it. And when you lose, sometimes you still think you were right and you got unlucky, right? But I think if you want a sports bet at any level, other than, just strictly social, at any level, even when you win, and I know the great sports bettors do this, even when they win, they go back and look at their analysis and go, okay, yes, I got paid. That doesn't mean I was right. Like maybe my analysis was wrong. And I think that's a thing most sports bettors, casual sports bettors, do not do. When they win, they move on. When they're wrong, they try to see, maybe why I was wrong or maybe I got unlucky. And so here, like I said, interestingly here, even I said, we should have taken more Philly, not just because they won. And interestingly, once we didn't take more Philly, we're really still not supposed to take the Bills on Sunday. So whatever entries we had on the Bills should have been spread out. We would have had at least 1 or 2 more on Denver. We would have lost more, but that still would have been the right decision. It's not just about the result. It's about the decision. So, nobody's perfect. We keep making tweaks and on we move.
Yeah. Talk about the emotions of Sunday, because, we watched the game together as well. Broncos, they get up 21-3. They're just cruising. You think Russell Wilson and Peyton are clicking again. And then on the flip side, you have the New York Football Giants, who are getting their clock cleaned here by Arizona, and 17.8% of the pool has them. So, one side, you're looking really good. The other side, you're just like, wow, Giants are going to go down. And then it just completely just levels off, flip-flops to the Giants pull it off. And then Denver comes back down and gets this miracle Hail Mary, just incredible. So the emotions of losing entries on one team and winning entries on the other and going back and forth was just absolutely.
And I remember saying when he lines up for the Hail Mary, I go, I don't even think Russell Wilson can throw the ball that far, right? And he got it further than I thought he did. He threw it. It was inside the 5-yard, but he didn't get it in the end zone. And I know he was trying to. And the ball's at like the 2. And literally, if anybody catches it there, even the offense, they're not going to be able to get in the end zone. But the ball, instead of getting caught, gets tipped up in the air, right? And it gets caught it was one of the craziest Hail Marys. It was, look, it's so much fun to watch that stuff. That is what makes the NFL so much fun. As poorly as Denver played in the second half, and by the way, the pass right before the Hail Mary, I don't even think that was a completed pass. I don't even understand how that didn't get reversed. At which point, there's no way he gets the ball anywhere near the end zone. So as poorly as Denver played, sure, I could look at that one play, but they don't even deserve to be that. That was just awful. The second half was just beyond abysmal. Just bad.
Looking at some of the equities of the pool, Bills had 40.3%. Raiders scored the early touchdown and then just go to sleep. There's nothing there, not even a sweat. But 40% on a team, you got to like that.
Well, I'm going to be blunt. The only time you would ever want to have a team where 40% of the field has that team is when there's 10 players left and 40% may not even be the biggest entry, right? You never want to be on a team where 40% of the field has it. If you only have one entry, and I remember when we first started playing, we said to a good friend of ours, about Survivor, and we finally kind of understood more strategies about this. And we said, well, when you're down to one entry, I guess you get a little bit more conservative and take the chalk a little more. He actually said, and he's totally right. He said, no, actually, when you get down to one entry, you're supposed to gamble more, right? Because the probability you're going to rip off 20 straight wins are so close to 0 with one entry, or even 15 or 10 or 5 in the NFL so hard. You need to hope to win before you get to that point, right? So you're going to need the big upsets, or you really have no chance to win this thing. And I think that, again, like I said, if I knew 40% are going to be on the Bills, we don't take them. I take 0 entries, literally 0. You could tell me I had 500 entries in this thing, which we do not and never did. We never had anywhere close to that. You could tell me I had 500 entries. I still do not put one on the Bills if I know 40% are going to be on the Bills.
Correct.
That's where you make your money. If everybody advances with you, you've earned nothing.
Yeah. The one that just continues to baffle me is the equity on the Cowboys. I mean, just looking ahead, not factoring in future information in terms of injuries and those type of things, but it's well noted that there's 3 teams that that you're going to have to play one of those 3 teams on Thanksgiving, and those teams just continue to get picked. So the Cowboys had 710 entries, 9.8% of the pool. Detroit had 348, 4.8%. I know Detroit had the big win coming out, but at some point you're going to have to pull back some of these teams if you plan on making it through Thanksgiving. If you think,
well, I would bet a lot of money the pool does not end before Thanksgiving. I'm not sure if the pool makes it to the end or not, but what I've said is if people get through Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day, the pool's got a really good shot to make it to the end. But I think there's always a chance Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day, the pool has a good chance to make it to the end. Okay. Jesse, if you're there, I just heard a record. Maybe Jesse vanished. And we're back. So when you
go ahead, I'll edit all this out.
Welcome back. It's all right. We're good. Right? I'm just going to keep going since it does say recording in progress. Make sure you edit all this junk out. So, when you look at it, most of the people are going to be on those big favorites on those days because you just don't have a lot of choices. And if you've taken Dallas, I have to assume it's way too early to look at this, the actual grid of whomever. I have to assume everybody that's used Dallas has not used San Francisco, who plays at Seattle. Otherwise, you're dealing with a Packer-Lion game, and I mean, I guess you just take the Lions. But I don't have the warm and fuzzies about any of those. But it's back to holding multiple options. Any of those one teams takes an injury, and you're done. So you're banking. And I understand you got to gamble in Survivor sometimes. You take a team, it is what it is. But taking Dallas now, I mean, there's still so many other gambles you're going to have to take, right? I don't know. So we'll see what happens with those, and perhaps they have a plan, and perhaps they don't have a plan. Again, I would say the vast majority of people that want to play Survivor, their goal is to just advance the next week. Right. So they look at Dallas, they think it gives them a good chance to advance the next week. And that's the end of the thought process.
Sure. Yeah. So on Survivor Sweat X handle, after the picks were revealed on Saturday night, you took over the handle and you went into some detail about how we landed on each one of our picks, Buffalo, the Giants, Broncos, etc. So do you want to elaborate a little bit about that?
Sure. And, I think that, and we had some internal debate here too, as to whether we were going to come out there and say, this is like our one pick, right? And I said, one of the reasons I don't want to do that is I think the thought process is important. Otherwise you end up with, I could have 4 teams we're picking between, and for all you know, I threw a dart, right? Yep. And so at the end of the day, it's fairly consistent as to what we said there. I'm looking down it, and Buffalo, they have a good matchup against the Raiders, but given they look like the most popular team this week, we'd prefer to avoid them. That said, we took a very small piece, right? And we didn't know yet they were going to have 40%. Like I said, if I did, I'd rather have an even smaller piece than we did. But yeah, I mean, they're a safe pick to win, but safe in the NFL is not 100%. I mean, Josh Allen exposes himself. He could get hurt in the first quarter of a game and not play. You just don't know what's going to happen there.
Agree.
So there's always risk. There's no 100% in the NFL. Dallas, same thing we just talked about. We thought it could have as much as 20%. It ended up with 10, I think.
Yeah.
And most places looked like it would be 20. As I said, I suspected Circle would be lower because people are going to save them for Thanksgiving. So they ended up with 10%. If you didn't want to save them, then it's fine, I guess, if you have another plan. But if you don't have another plan, even if at the end of the day, one of our partners said, well, maybe we burn a couple on Dallas, but so what? We'll take San Francisco. Maybe if it reached the point and you have the stones to do it, if there are not that many people left on Thanksgiving Day, maybe you just take the Commanders and you hope to take the whole pool down. You know, because you could have literally 2 or 3 upsets and that's the end. Like the whole thing could just be over. So if that's your plan, then don't burn Dallas. I mean, if that's your plan, you can burn Dallas if you never plan on using them. The Giants, they obviously looked awful in week 1. They're playing the Cardinals, so people have a piece. Same thing here. We took a small piece on them, but we ended up in a spot where it was, unfortunately, I guess, pretty close to neutral for us, whether they won or lost. We had almost the same amount of picks, for rounding on them as the field did. So if we think we're better than the field, of course, we'd rather not lose those picks. But it was fairly close. It kind of lined up, as a little worse for us than we thought it might. Philly, we've talked about a few times. Of course, we wish we took more. Some of that's results oriented, but watching them play, I don't know. And then Denver, as I said, Philly is safer, but Denver has almost no future value, right? And I didn't address the Philly being dinged up there, but Denver was a risky play, and we said that. And a lot of people thought they were like a quote unquote lock and whatever. They were a risky play, but I really had no desire to use them down the road. And we didn't think a lot of people would be on them. And the fact that we had, I think, just made it less worth taking them because we don't have as big an edge there when they
absolutely in our internal conversations. It's
win.
I mean, I had no hesitation pushing the Broncos button because this is how you're going to win the pool. I'm obviously, a lot of people know that we've won this contest last year, at least tied for the win, and they're quick to ask me, who'd you take? And once I reveal some of the picks, I get the eye roll, like, what?
Right.
Are you kidding me? And then especially on Monday, when I see people, they're like, wow, I just can't believe you have the stones to do that. And I just, without getting into what we talk about on the podcast and in the long conversations, I'm just, hey, this is how you're going to win the pool. Odds are we won't. And
to be blunt again, I've said this before, this is how you win the most money, right? You're the most likely to win the pool probably by just betting against the Cardinals every week and hoping you get to the end, right? You're not likely to get there that way, but you're probably more likely than anything else. But you might split the pool with 500 entries.
Correct.
So you're not going to get there very often. So I'm hoping to win the pool with 1, us, or 2 or 3, or even 10. But winning the pool with 500 people, honestly, I would feel like, sure, it's better to win than to lose. But I would feel like if we won the pool with 500 people, we had a bad strategy that entire time. Something we did was wrong.
I agree.
That shouldn't be how we're setting ourselves up.
I agree. It was
on to Cincinnati. What do we got coming next? Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I looked back on Alex Browna, his picks. He lost 1. He went 3 Cowboys, 2 Bills, 1 Lions, and 1 Saints. And to bring everybody up to speed, Alex Brown was the co-winner for last year. Mm-hmm. So as we mentioned last time in the pod, it's fun to track some of the individuals that we develop relationships with towards the end. So interesting to see their strategy and see where they land. Of course, as we mentioned last week as well, could have more entries under another name, but this is the name that we know, and this is the handle. So 3 Cowboys, 2 Bills, 1 Lions.
Yeah, look, it's if he has another plan for Thanksgiving, and he's a smart guy, so I'm sure he does have another plan for Thanksgiving. I think it's certainly reasonable. The 2 Bills, in hindsight, again, if he knows 40% of the field is going to be on the Bills, I have a feeling he doesn't take the Bills either, but maybe I'm wrong. He probably didn't think you'd have that big, a portion on Bills. But, he did spread it out. He had 4 different teams, and luckily for him, none of them were Denver. So, yeah, he loses the one with the Lions, and the Lions are probably a good team to have going forward, although he probably has them in the other 3. I didn't look as to whether he's used them before or not. Whereas Denver, I mean, if they win this week, had they won, and I don't want to give all the ifs because you can always do that, but had they won, the reality is they only have 2 even plausible games coming up. And one of them is week, 13 or 14 or something, at home against Houston. And then the other one, in theory, so I'm at this point, I don't even it's coming up against the Jets in a few weeks, which is just not a good spot.
The game versus Houston's on the road, actually. So even the 2 that they were favored, one was on the road. It was just not a lot of future value, if any, to be honest. So
no, and the Jets have a good defense, and Denver's a little rocky. And so look, I mean, by definition, since Denver hasn't won a game, I don't have to look. Every pick we still have remaining must still have Denver available. There's no chance we've used them on those. And I suspect there's very little chance we use them ever. I mean, we might. Maybe we wake up and we have to use them against Houston, although their quarterbacks look decent. I don't know. Long time to go.
Sure, sure.
Time for a message from our sponsor. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back with the Survivor Sweat Podcast.
If you live out of state but want to enter any of the biggest football handicapping contests in Las Vegas, you've come to the right place. Football Proxy is the most professional proxy service in Las Vegas and can serve as your trusted proxy to enter your picks each week for the Super Contest, Circa Sports Millions, or Circa Survivor contests. What makes Football Proxy different from other proxies? Well, like other proxies, we have late selection deadlines and an easy-to-use web portal to submit your picks each week. But, unlike other proxies, we allow our customers to change their picks anytime before the pick deadline, which is crucial when gathering last-minute information. Ask another proxy if they allow you to make changes to your picks and see their reaction. It's what makes us the top-rated proxy service in Las Vegas. To get started, fill out the contact form and a representative will contact you to answer any questions and schedule an appointment. Then book your trip to Las Vegas and meet us at the designated casino to get signed up. Once the season starts, sweat the action all season long with your picks. Schedule an appointment today and compete against the world's best for your chance at millions.
Sure. All right. So if we were to prognosticate week 3 percentages, where will the equities land?
Yeah. And so
looking at some of the early outs here,
Yep.
we got Chiefs minus 12.5 versus the Bears,
Mhm.
Cowboys 11.5 at the Cardinals, Niners minus 10 versus the New York Football Giants. And that's a Thursday night contest here with possibly their star running back Barkley not participating. Jags minus 9, Ravens minus 8. As we mentioned last week, maybe off air, there was a lot of teams that had some wide spreads going into this week.
There are 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I'm looking at, I'd probably rather look somewhere else, but there are 2 teams actually 3 teams over 80% likely to win this game. Most people look at point spreads. I look at sort of the money line or the equivalent market odds. And you've got also the initial projections, which again will vary slightly because these projections don't take Circa into account. So they're not taking into account Thanksgiving or Christmas Day. But the initial projections have basically 3 teams at a 20% popularity rating and 1 at 15, right? So you should have a concentration of those 4 teams that are going to be picked this week. Those 4 teams are Jacksonville, Dallas, Kansas City, and San Francisco. So it again, just like last week, it makes it tricky because it's going to be hard. Usually I'm trying to find a team that you don't have 20% of the field taken, that you've got, 5 or 6% of the field taken. This is going to be tougher. But the teams that are out there that, plausibly we could look at, and we will look at those teams I just mentioned. I'm sure we'll have some, a taste of some of those as well. But the other teams out there that kind of are okay are Baltimore, which looks like maybe they'll have a 7% popularity. You've got Buffalo, if you still haven't used them, which should be very low popularity if you want to, take them in at Washington on the road, and Seattle, which shouldn't have much popularity, in Detroit. And then and that's the end. I mean, there are 9 teams that you plausibly could take: Baltimore, Jacksonville, Dallas, Kansas City, Buffalo, Seattle, Detroit. There's Philly. If you haven't used them too, they could be plausible, and San Francisco. So, but really a lot of them are going to be concentrated right up at the top.
Yeah.
You're going to have Jacksonville, Dallas, Kansas City, San Francisco are going to be the big heavy action plays.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the percentages land on each specific one. If because there's several teams to take, will that be spread out a little bit more than it was obviously the week before?
Yeah, if I had to guess, first thing you'll see is instead of, maybe almost 20% taking Dallas, you can probably safely cut that in half. Say it's another 10, maybe only 7, because people that are inclined to take Dallas before Thanksgiving probably already took them last week. So you might only get 5 to 7% on Dallas, and then you're going to be spreading that, 15% around between most of these other teams, Jacksonville, Kansas City, etc. So some of those could be big. You could have a lot of people I think you will have a lot of people on Kansas City and Jacksonville this weekend. I think that would be my guess.
A lot of rhetoric out there. It's the winningest quarterback versus the one that has the least win percentage. Or
Whatever. I mean, it's look, we happened to bet a few different plays last week. Some teasers, some Wong teasers for people that know what a Wong is, and for those that don't and think we're just suckers, that's fine too. For betting teasers, all good. But I think we had 8 different teams combined in various permutations of teasers. The only one we lost was Justin Fields, was Chicago, right? All he had to do was not throw an interception in his own goal line, like into the line of scrimmage. It was just, honestly, he looks, I always say that all of those sort of statistics are kind of garbagey because it's not like the two of them against each other. Like when they say one team has beaten another, 20 straight times, I'm like, the players aren't even in the same as when they played 18, times ago. But in this particular instance, Justin Fields looks just very, very bad. And when you watch game film of him, which I know you do, Mike, from time to time when you're studying games, I do, but not to the same degree.
Yeah.
They show constantly that there are open receivers out there. He just doesn't see them. His vision, there's something going on there. And I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Everybody was looking for him to take a next step this year. And it's just not working through 2 games. I mean, I know we're early, it's 2 weeks, but right now it's just not clicking on offense for them. So maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't, not sure.
But usually when we say not clicking, it's, schemes are bad, right? Something else is going wrong. Receivers aren't getting open. They're running when they should pass. They pass when they should run. Here, actually, and this seems really unfair. I mean, usually when an offense is stinking, the quarterback takes the blame, the offensive coordinator take the blame. Those 2 guys and the head coach, right? It's always those 3.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, if you actually watch like an all 22,
yeah,
I think the offensive coordinator is doing a good job. I mean, he's got guys that are open. They're running routes. They're in empty space.
Agree. He's just not pulling the trigger. He's not seeing it. So
Nope.
I'm not quite sure what's going on with his reads and the process there. And he's just, I'd like to see him get him out in the pocket a little bit more. It seems like they're trying to make him a little bit too much a pocket passer. I want to get him on the run, get him some positive plays early on. The run game hasn't clicked there. So, I mean, the coaching staff hopefully knows more than I do. So hopefully
he looks afraid. And look, I'm not trying to be overly critical. Like I've said, when we have friends that say this guy's terrible, he's awful, he's a terrible quarterback. And I go, okay, would you admit he's probably one of the top 50 quarterbacks in the world? And they go, well, sure. Right. So I'm not trying to say Justin Fields is not a great athlete. I'm not trying to say he's not a smart guy. I'm not trying to say he's not qualified to play in the NFL. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm not, those are all absurd, but he does look very gun shy back there. And that's a problem in the NFL. You don't have a lot of time and you've got to make it. You've got to be willing. You got to be confident enough to make the decision and pull the trigger. Yeah. It doesn't look like he does.
Yep. So not to look way, way too far ahead with these lines, I also pulled up next week's lines, and there's not too many teams that have large spreads, but I have
not, but I'll pull them up right now and take a look. You're assuming we'll still have entries, right?
Yeah.
We have, I would bet we still have something alive. I don't know how many, we'll have something.
Yeah.
Looks like you've got San Francisco, Philly, Kansas City, Dallas. Those will be the big favorites, followed by, your tier 2 of Pittsburgh, New Orleans, Chargers.
Yeah.
Minnesota, and then it gets basically 50-50 games. It just sort of dries up.
Yeah. So, it's interesting to see when I have conversations, we have conversations with others, how far people look ahead. I know people map out the whole year. Some map out, 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time. But it's just fun to look ahead sometimes. I know we do it, but, it's a week to week league here. And so, this week will be interesting to see where those equities lands. And just looking at, I was able to pull up through from Circa Sports some historical data on the Circa Survivor. Now, I know we're only 3 years. This is the 4th year in existence. So early stages here. I know year 1, it seemed like there was some carnage at the beginning, week 1, and then it was slow. And then it took right in the middle, it took a little bit of hit where 30-40% of the pool got whacked. Looking at 2021, the first 7 weeks, pretty slow, and then straight carnage. So
looking at the numbers you sent over.
Yeah.
Yep.
In relation to last year, there was carnage in the first 7 weeks.
Right.
And then it got really slow. painfully slow until week 14 and then so on. So, you
I
know,
remember in week 6, we had a couple of people in our group that said, oh, this will never make it to the end. I don't even know if this will make this to Thanksgiving. And,
correct. Yeah.
here's the thing about it, though. This is like, it's not a coincidence. I mean, it could be, but it probably isn't, right? And it's not, you're in a spot, you could have any 1 or 2 weeks where there are big upsets in the NFL, and you will. Like, you're far more likely to have 2 weeks of the biggest favorite of the year loses than you are having 0 of those weeks, right? Like, to pick which week, that's really hard. You're an underdog to pick which week it's going to be. Like, it's beyond really hard. I mean, you're by definition, right? Like, if you've got this week, like who's the biggest favorite this week? I think it's Dallas, right?
Oh no, it's
so
Chiefs at 12.5, but there's
it's close. The market at, yeah, okay, say the Chiefs, it's fine. So the Chiefs are like about 85% to win, approximately, give or take. So that means, assuming the books are right and they're pretty good at what they do, that means 15% of the time they're going to lose.
Yeah.
So if you were to just outright bet Chicago, you're only going to win 15% of the time. But 15% of the time over the course of a whole season, there's a higher probability a couple of those are going to win than none of them are going to win, right? You take the 83, even to win 2 weeks in a row at 80%, it's 80% times 80%. It's 64% to just do 2, right? And so then you're looking at that third week is like the chances an 80% favorite wins 3 weeks in a row is less than 50%, put it that way. So over the course of a year, it's obviously way less than that. And so you look at that. So first of all, that's going to happen. But second of all, as you pointed out earlier when we were speaking, because there was no carnage early, that meant that the big favorites probably won in those weeks, right? So when they probably won, the large chunks of the field advanced because they're taking the huge favorites. But that also means they don't have those. Usually huge favorites are good teams. Like, you're not going to see Houston as a big favorite ever. They might be a 1-point favorite in a game. I think they were against Colts, right? But you're never going to see them being huge favorites. You're never going to really see Green Bay being a huge favorite. You'll see them being a favorite. These are teams you're not going to see as big favorites, right? So the ones that are big favorites are always going to be the Dallases, the Kansas Cities, the San Franciscos, the Buffaloes, the Philadelphias. Those are going to be the big favorites. So when they win, lots of people advance, but then they don't have them anymore.
Yeah. And to your point, so this week, 7 teams are 6.5-point favorites or better or greater. So, I mean, one would say that at least one of those guys are going to go down,
Yes.
Who knows?
I would be willing. You're a big favorite that at least one of those teams go down.
Maybe 2. So maybe there's.
Yeah, I haven't done the math, but you're probably a favorite that at least 2 go down. Now, which 2 again? That's very different than saying 2 will lose is not the same as saying which 2 will lose. They're very different things. Yeah. Very different things. But I think it's a safe guess that 2 of the top 7 will lose.
The pool would be a lot easier to win if we could, for sure.
A little bit, just a little bit. But then what fun would it be?
Absolutely. All right. So, hey, on the discussion board on survivorsweat.com, I know we mentioned that's the one-stop shop to go and find all content for Circa Survivor. Check it out. But there was a discussion board popped on there, and we wanted to see if somebody had any questions that they wanted us to answer on the pod. And lo and behold, we had a question. So this is from Cameron STX. For Mike and Russ, and it was, what is the most difficult part of Circa Survivor that gets talked about the least?
And I'm glad I read this just before we got on the pod, because I didn't actually prior. And it's a really good question. It sounds really simple, but it isn't, right? I actually think it is being willing to pull the trigger on the pick is right, but you're just taking a lot of risk. Like in our case, if Philly wasn't on Thursday, if it was on a different day, maybe taking 70% of our picks and putting them on Philly, right? Really just taking a huge risk, right? And having the stones to go ahead and push that button. Or even on Saturday afternoon, before we put in our picks for this week, just saying, you know what, we're not taking any Bills. And we're putting even more of them on Denver, right? And, even us, we hedged a little bit out. And I think that is the hardest thing that everybody thinks they need to know what to do. You can kind of figure out what to do. It's pulling the trigger on doing it and knowing there's some probability this is going to be the end. Yeah. And one of the guys in our group once, he was doing an NCAA pool, and I wasn't in this, but I was told by a mutual friend, and he actually calculated. NCAA is tricky because you also you have to follow the brackets, because otherwise you might not have a team to take it all, right? So you have to know who's going to be available in a bracket. And he realized that basically the entire pool was going to be on one specific team. He ended up taking like a 6-point underdog or something, right? And he's a smart guy, and he did it, and his expected value on it was huge. And I think I would do that too if it was $100 pool, with 50 people or whatever, right? But if it was this pool, I don't know if I'm going to have the stones to like sit there on Thanksgiving Day and take an underdog.
Yeah.
Even if it's right.
We've discussed that as having the conviction and pushing the button, knowing the right play and actually doing it, willing to die, willing to lose your entry.
Yep.
For the sake of winning the pool.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's always easy to say you'll do it, and it's just hard to do.
Of course. Genius when it happens, just an absolute.
Yep. Donkey when it doesn't.
That's correct. And the second part to his question was, what are some challenges that the average participant fails to think about in the long run?
And this one we've talked about a few times. I really think it is, you have to somehow find a way to have flexibility in your path. Right? Like you can't just go, okay, this is week 3, this is week 4, this is week 5, because something is going to happen. It's the NFL. And there's going to be some week where you're like, I know I was planning on taking this team now, but I can't. They have no quarterback. They have no defense. The things like that can really burn you. So you have to have flexibility, but let's remember, if you believe this is going 20 weeks, which, who knows, but if you believe it's going 20 weeks, there are 32 teams in the NFL. So this is not rocket science, right? This means there are 12 teams that you're never taking, right? So rather than thinking there are 20 teams I am taking, there are 12 teams you're never taking. You can go down the list pretty quickly and pick 5 or 6 you probably would never take. Arizona, you're never going to look to take Arizona. You're never going to look to take Chicago. Probably never looking to take Houston. There are teams that you're really never, ever, ever going to take, right? So once you've ruled those out, now suddenly the other, say, 20 that you think you're going to take plus maybe 6, those 6 are sort of your backup choices. That's not that many, because of those 6, you're going to be looking at teams like a Denver now, like not back when people thought Denver was good, right? The New York Jets probably might not be on your take list. They might be on the backup list, right? Yeah. Teams like, Seattle, maybe sometimes they can be taken at home. Like it's tough. New England, they've got an awful schedule. So those are suddenly teams you have to, when you actually think about, don't lock in 20, lock in 24, 26, you're going to go, oh my God, some of these are really, because some of them play the same week, it's hard. And I think that's the thing people don't really think about. And then similar to that, which we did think about last year, but it's this, I don't even know, really, really hard. Who are you saving for week 20? Because for a lot of teams, the games don't matter anymore. Either they don't matter because they've locked up a playoff spot, or they don't matter because they're not going to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And are they playing to win? Are they playing to lose? Who's playing? Who's sitting? And it's literally impossible to know. But I would say saving some quality team for the last week of the year is probably not a good idea. But saving a decent team that you think is going to be in a tough playoff race, like a tough division, that can have value, because the game is, you don't know, the game is more likely to mean something to them.
And to add a little content to that, last year in week 16, we had zeroed in taking Detroit at Carolina for some time, maybe 3 or 4 weeks out. And once we got into the week and I did some work on the game and dug deeper, I found out we can't take them. And
this was 2 weeks before, because we did end up taking them in week 19, if I remember right.
Correct. Yeah. So having multiple picks and being able to work multiple games and have multiple options, granted, they might not be great, but they are options to take. And we did pull some back and save some second and third options for that case.
Yeah, and they're never going to be. It's an illusion if you're delusional if you think they're going to be great. Even us, where we're trying to avoid the chalk, we're trying to save some better teams. I mean, you get to the end, the top 5 or 6 teams going into a given week, nobody has them. Nobody's taking them. They're all gone. You're not getting these 8-point favorites anymore. You're taking 3.5-point favorites, 4-point favorites, maybe 2.5-point favorites, depending, right? So you're never going to have great teams come the end of the year.
Well, thanks, Cameron STX, for the questions. Those were awesome. we encourage anybody that listens to the pod to go onto survivorsweat.com, get on the discussion board, and ask us some questions. We'll answer them here to the best of our ability here on the pod. Maybe right, maybe wrong, but you'll get a piece of our brain. And to that end, you can find us on survivorsweat.com, X handle at survivorsweat. And we'd love to connect with you. So if you want to reach out to us, we'd love to chat for sure. And we look forward to this upcoming weekend. We look forward to the submission, 4 o'clock submission there for Circa to get those picks in. And then who knows, Russ or I will take over the Twitter handle and maybe give you some reasoning as once the picks are revealed, and let you know where we landed and why we landed there. And another week in the book. Looking forward to
Another week.
And let's make sure to get those entries in, folks.
Let's try to get a few more entries advanced this week. That's our goal.
Yes. Let's get them through. All right.
Exactly.
Signing
All right.
off.
Later, everybody.
Till next week.
Bye.
See ya.
Looking for Survivor strategy articles? Did you lose your last entry on a Survivor contest and wish you could rebuy? Check out our marketplace and you may find what you need. Head over to survivorsweat.com for all things Survivor. And we'll see you next week for the next Survivor Sweat podcast.